get the question of what we have done, and I said we created 10 Jira cards. That's it. That has happened a bit since then, and I would like to take the opportunity to say thanks to the guys in my team security working group. So please give them a hand. So today we have people. We have Roger from Symantec, Charles from ARM, we have Case from Google, and Grant and Ard from Linaro. So why don't we start with passing the mic around and a short introduction, and you let us know about your relation with security.
You go first.
Sure. My name is Art Biesheuvel. I'm in the enterprise group of Linaro. I'm mostly involved with boot architecture, UEFI, and boot security.
My name is Grant Likely. I'm in the office of the CTO, which means I'm madly off in all directions, looking at different areas, and part of my focus in the last 6 months has been looking at security and what the overall architecture is.
Hi, my name is Case Cook. I work on Chromebooks and Brillo at Google, and I spend most of my time looking at kernel security, especially security vulnerability mitigations.
Hi, I'm Charles Garcia-Tomin. I'm a token security expert today, because Jason's the real security expert. But I am quite intimately involved in what we're doing in secure firmware and specifications thereof. So.
No, that honor is mine. I'm the lesser expert here. I work at Symantec. My name is Roger Casals, and I lead the mobile and IoT trust, whatever trust has to do with security. Okay.
Great. So the first topic I would like to talk about is security attacks. We have still, today you can see about attacks like buffer overflows, we have return objective programming, heap sprays, and so on. And there has been countermeasures developed during the years. We have NXBit, we have GCC stack smashing protection, and so on. But still we find out about these issues. So how is that, and what can we do about it?
I think there's still a lot more work to be done. I think there's been a lot of focus on bug hunting and bug fixing, as opposed to killing entire classes of vulnerabilities. We've done decent work in the upstream kernel in that regard, but we don't have a lot in the way of self-protection technologies, things that expect to be attacked, as opposed to just sort of stopping individual bugs. I think focusing on that is probably where we're going to see a lot more activity in the future.
I think just to follow up on what you were saying, I think that's one of the areas where the work that we've been doing on the kernel has been hugely important. And having code upstream, working with the upstream kernel has made it a whole lot easier to bring in other experts and get feedback from folks that we'd never heard from before who have gone and analyzed the code. And that's been really interesting. But still, I mean, we do have a very complicated system, which, you know, I think about it sometimes and I'm absolutely terrified by how big and how complex our software stacks have become. And there's a real importance, not just the security of the Linux kernel or the software stacks that we're using, but there's a really big it's important to look at security as a whole and try to carve things up into separate segmented pieces that can be protected from each other, so that we've got multiple layers of things that are secure, so that even if one thing is compromised, it doesn't give away the entire system.
Well, I'm actually quite concerned from the enterprise angle about this topic because, well, personally, I have like a mobile embedded background. That also goes for a lot of the members that are now involved in the enterprise group and starting to do security there. There are actually a couple of members who have been doing this for a while, but all the security they do is completely out of sight, out of the field of view of Linaro. So we have to be very careful not to kind of duplicate mistakes from the past by yeah, by not having the feedback from the experts, from the members that are doing this by themselves.
Yeah, no, I'd just like to echo that the kernel doesn't operate in isolation, but we have multiple layers, and actually on the firmware side, blobs in there, and so I think getting the interfaces to those things right is going to be crucial, because the very common attacks are privilege escalation attacks, where you get the firmware higher privilege to do something for you from a rogue VM or rogue driver in the kernel. So I think that's going to be really, really key to get right.
Well, basically, I concur with what Grant said. I think that we have to simplify. There are already too many layers, and adding more layers of security won't bring anything good. Less is more here, so less threat vectors. I think that will help. Three things that are obvious that we recommend to all our customers: leverage hardware enforced security, of course. Encrypt everything. It's surprising how many things are not yet encrypted in the whole stack, and then have this holistic approach to the whole security. Not only in the microkernel, I think that we have to protect the whole thing. So it's not just the device itself, what it's running in there. We have to think holistically, including what's in the cloud as well, right? How we have the full chain, what I mentioned yesterday, the supply chain integrity is really important, right? Trusting every single step. I think that then we will be safer.
During the Linux Security Summit this year, Constantine, who runs kernel.org, is the lead admin at kernel.org, gave a great keynote where he made a metaphor about computer engineering versus vehicle engineering in the 50s and 60s, where cars were designed to run, not designed to crash. And only a very few couple specialty vehicles were designed really to, protect the user. And we're sort of in that state right now, and more, getting more people to shift their perspective in thinking about security. And as we don't want these computers just to run, we actually want them to crash safely. Or be attacked safely is sort of the extension of that metaphor. And I thought that was a nice way of looking at how to think about these protections and changes to make.
Great, thanks. So now we have sorted out a lot of software issues. What about hardware? I mean, we have side channel attacks, timing attacks, DPA, and so on. How do we deal with that? Do we need to care about it?
I'm not that concerned. Maybe here again, I'm the ugly duck. I'm not that concerned. So to me, that's more a physical security matter, right? So yes, there will be always something that we missed in our design, but I'm more concerned about those hacks that can be actually replicated, and then that they can actually scale real big. Those are the ones that I really care about. That side channel attacks, yes, but I'm personally not that concerned.
Is that really a physical security issue, though? I mean, with the complexity of the hardware that we've got, I mean, we love talking about the application processor. We've got a big A-class core in our cell phones, and it's outnumbered by the 10 other little ARM cores that are all throughout the system. All of those, some of them network attached, some of them running the network, and equally vulnerable to attack. And once you have ownership of something that's on the device, you've got another surface area that may be attacked. So are we going to start to see a situation where you can see mass market attacks or mass attacks based on a class of device, not because the application processor software was compromised first, but because another part of the system was compromised?
Again, if we've done a good job encrypting everything uniquely and distinctively, that effort that you've done for one device will have to be repeated again for every single one, and that doesn't scale. Economically speaking, hackers are really good businessmen. So if it doesn't scale economically, they won't do that. So that's why if they have to repeat the same effort every single time, they won't do this. So yeah, from time to time we will see here and there, but I'm not that concerned.
Is there a concern, though, that if you manage to do it on one device, it might allow you to discover something that opens up a new class attack? Right.
No, of course.
I think with any of these more complicated areas, examining your product's threat model, like who are you actually worried about, it ends up, leading you in the direction of where you can expend your resources to protect things. And so, I mean, there's side channel, but from someone sitting next to you, they might be able to, listen to electrical emissions from your device, or there's side channel on the system, which is what we were talking about. So not only do we really have to worry about, attacks against that, there's also privacy concerns. What I can read your email because I can sniff whatever emissions are coming from the device. So my personal opinion is that there's probably a lot more to be done on the software stacks than on the hardware stacks first. Like we can't even get, like you were saying, we can't even get encryption right and everywhere first on the stack. We should probably fix that first, and then we can get into hardware as that as the bar gets raised.
Great. Let's switch topic a little bit. Complexity. As you know, today we have software running in Linux kernel, user space, TPM, trust execution environment, firmware, and so on. So it's quite difficult to have an oversight of everything. And can we really cope up with, can we really be sure that saying that the system is secure? If we go back 10, maybe 15, 20 years, we had a single core system. We had security in kernel mode and user mode. That wasn't enough. We added more features and so on. Is it all this new added functionality helping us, or we just keep digging a bigger hole?
I guess, it's worth pointing out that obviously, we have added a lot of complexity, but the complexity and insecurity, it poses an increasing challenge, but we've added it for a reason, right? So we have to balance the security against the requirements elsewhere, right? Things like adding virtualization, things like adding secure firmware levels, are a requirement. The challenge is, to me, is not just that on the security side. It's not just that we have all these layers. It's also that we have multiple vendors operating in the individual layers. So to me, earlier we were talking about the importance of open source in security, and because you can audit code and check it out. To me, the importance now is also much more on standards, because again, we can use those standards to make sure that the interfaces between these layers are as secure as they can be, and that the vendors can only interoperate in secure ways. Right. So that would be my only comment on that.
Yeah, if you look at the kernel, I think we could be doing much better, and I think the complexity is actually maybe hurting us a bit. In my mind, the primary problem that is causing this is that there's all this policy that is put into the kernel, like all these controls, all these kind of, we have to set up the system actually to allow certain syscalls to be done by certain classes of programs, etc., etc. And actually the kernel should be more about features than it should be about policy. And I think we could be doing much better in that area by having kernel features that processors can use to drop certain privileges, enable some kind of protections by default, and have a much more scalable and much easier to configure secure system.
So do we have the technology that we need to, do we have the structure and the framework to be able to do that and look at kernel features in terms of be able to automatically set up the security features of the processor and move the policy out of the kernel? and then have a good conceptual model of what our security is like, or are we still lacking in tools to be able to really understand what the whole overall security model is? Maybe tools is the wrong question, more capability.
Well, the things that I think of is would not only affect the kernel, but would also affect the loader and the libc, and in ELF have some extra metadata like manifests that declare what kind of capability effort just at the kernel level, but I still think it's a very interesting avenue to explore.
That's kind of a solution that would go right up into middleware, right? I mean, it's not presumably if you're talking about sort of a kind of capabilities model where you can say this process can use these features of the platform. So it would be completely beyond kernel and go into individual distributions, and yeah, and it affects everything from installation to, yeah.
I think this was sort of touched on a little bit with, we've got all these separate devices or separate layers where things are running. You've got stuff above the kernel and above that and all these other different layers. Not only being able to examine the source code of those things is critically important, but also being able to examine the actual contents of memory. How do you prove to yourself that the source code you're looking at is actually the binary that's running in that piece, and that you don't depend on that software to tell you what it says, because it could lie to you. So having good hardware interfaces to say, oh, I'm going to actually read out the memory of the trust zone layer or something. I mean, in a physical sense, you probably don't want to hook that up to the software.
Great, thanks. Next topic I would like to touch are IoT. As you know, quite often it's tiny devices, limited resources, and you can find them everywhere. So people might argue that, well, it's not important to have any security on an IT device. It can just turn on off my light bulb at home, it doesn't matter. But I argue saying that they can also be used in botnets. They can be entrances for getting access to networks and so on. So there must be some kind of security. So are we ready to put security into all these tiny devices with limited resources to make them secure enough?
Yes.
Good, next.
That's it. That's my contribution here. Yes, it's really important, but not only, I'm not that concerned. Again, maybe I'm weird here. I'm not that concerned about the botnets. I'm concerned that if a device is not secure by itself, you can kill people with that. So if you are messing around with the tire pressure of your car because you're doing some side channel attack. I'm more concerned about that. I want to make that tire pressure sensor really safe. And then we can talk about whether or not that tire sensor pressure, can become a botnet. It would be funny, right? But okay, that's what I'm concerned about. And I think that we are doing a lot of progress seeing how we are getting into a level of granularity that we can actually start applying good security to those sensors and to things that actually can get us killed, right?
So I think that I agree with the device security, and I think that we've got a whole lot of work to figure out how to make those devices secure. But I think that this is a problem that turns out to be equally a business problem as it is a technical problem. I mean, you've got your PC, someone ships you a PC, you install an operating system, and there's an expectation of updates. Phones, it's taken us a little bit longer to kind of figure out how to do that well, but there's a general expectation of a supported period for phones. And then there's a bit of a cliff when it falls off, and then you go and buy a new phone. The Internet of Things devices there's a huge class of devices that you will buy, you'll plug in, and you'll forget about for the next 5 years. There are a lot of low-cost devices, or a lot of devices where the manufacturer of these things are going to do it, they're going to build it, and then they're going to go off to something else. And I think the business problem is the fact that there's very little economic incentive to keep up on security on an individual device, because that just requires engineering effort. That requires someone to be able to look at it. That requires someone to have the bandwidth to look at it and the update mechanism to take care of it. So I think that at least part of the problem has to be, how do we make it easier to update these platforms? There's a couple of things that go into that. Like who do we trust when it comes to, so you will talk about that. Who do we trust on that? But also, who's actually writing the software for this? And one of the things that I think is important is we need to do a better job of, with the Internet of Things devices, of splitting up the layers and identifying what is our operating system layer, what is our trust layer, what is our application layer, and not have a vendor have to be responsible for the entire thing. If I'm building an internet-connected light bulb, my job is to provide an interesting product to my customers. My expertise is not going to be all the levels of operating system security. I would like to see us to have, be able to have Debian as the operating system and the application on top, with a update model that takes care of security, or with Android or embedded devices, that there's a distribution model that device manufacturers can make use of and get access to security work that's already going on to secure a device.
If it's easy for a vendor to produce a secure device, then they will. That's, in theory, the way to go. So trying to have good examples to work from, I think, is probably the best way to go. Because, like you say, business incentives, there's no reason to have all that. One piece I think that's important, although we've sort of talked about it a lot, is all that entire software stack should be, you ought to be able to examine it. You can update it yourself. APIs to these devices don't need to be secret. It can just be open. And then people can fix things themselves if they need to.
I would even go to the point of arguing that they need to be open. Not just it's a hard requirement that we've got openness and are able to talk about what the protocols are, and see, it's the old analogy of showing someone a lock and telling them the design of the lock, but don't give them the combination. And if they still can't open it, it means you've got a secure lock. But how do we get the business incentive to? Because I think there's the openness, but then also the business incentive. And do we have the way to get device manufacturers incentive to use the support?
Let me give you an incentive. I'm a baby monitor company, okay? Today is Friday, and my company got hacked, okay? And it's public, and smart people like you guys are messing with me and making fun of my company and trashing me in the LinkedIn and Facebook and all those things. And my competitors are doing the same thing. Well, it's easy. Incentive on Monday, I can call them. Well, whoever is in the security space can call them and say, hey, I can help you. Oh yeah, they have a huge incentive now to talk about security. So it will come. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, the question is, how do we get ahead of that? How do you have a company that says, oh, well, we're fine, we've never had a problem?
Or you guys can just go hack everything.
Yeah. It's always been hard to measure. It's like, oh, well, none of our products have been hacked that we are aware of. So clearly we're doing the right thing, but that has nothing to do with anything.
So, but the truth is, companies like Chrysler, I'm pretty sure that they are now chasing after who the heck can help me, right? So unfortunately, this is how it works. So right now, I don't know of any company on the elevator business that is taking a lot of care of that. We only need to see a few, hijacks on elevators, and you'll see how we start receiving calls from these companies.
Yeah, and if you burn your house down with a power strip enough, and the industry doesn't fix it, then you end up with government steps in and says, okay, for you to sell power strips, you need to pass these certifications and all these other things.
Right. Okay. Seems like we still have quite a few challenges to solve, and let's wrap it up for today, and thank you very much for joining.